For purposes of the proxy statement filed with the SEC, is an executive personal use of the company plane a perk? Today on Zippy Point.
Quick Zips by Zippy Point.
Quick and dirty. I'm Brock Romanek and I'm a big fan of use. It's a perk. Companies justify providing this benefit as providing a level of security for the executives and their family as a means to increase travel efficiency. But it's clearly a perk. It was even identified as such in the SEC's 2006 adoption release when it overhauled its executive pay rules. And this is the largest disclosed value of all perks, the biggie. For executives at some of the larger companies, they report over $150,000 worth of personal flying time annually. $150,000 personal flying time annually. Flying private is expensive, man. Ooh-wee, baby. It's like crack cocaine. Executives love their personal flying time. They love the corporate jet. You don't have to stand in line. You don't have to be with the commoners. And you're definitely secure. So these amounts get to be pretty big for the executive's personal use of the company plane. And when the executive brings up a partner, a spouse, the kids, or any guests, that's personal use of the plane too, and that's considered a perk. But generally adding those people is a diminished amount because it's just the incremental cost, but it still does need disclosure. Now with health concerns, COVID, of flying on commercial planes, some companies are requiring their executives to fly in corporate jets, even for personal use. So these numbers undoubtedly are going to grow higher in the future, in the very near future, this year's proxy statements. I should clarify that there are more companies than you would think where executives are not flying on private planes, and companies don't have corporate jets. There's so much media publicity about this topic that there might be a misconception that this is a universal practice among public companies, and that's far from the truth. An executive might be flying first class rather than coach, and the difference between the two is not a perk, by the way, but many executives do fly commercially. Executives at the larger companies, the blue chips that have been around a while, those are the ones that tend to use the private planes the most. High-tech companies on the West Coast, not so much, but it is a growing practice. Some companies have dollar limits or hourly maximums on personal use, after which the executive must reimburse the company. When an executive reimburses the company, that amount is not considered a perk. So the perk value would be limited to the cap amount, the amount that the executive didn't reimburse for personal use. So let's spend a minute on valuation. The SEC is a valuation standard of aggregate incremental costs. But how companies determine their incremental cost varies. The SEC allows companies to choose their own methodology. Having said that, the SEC has stated one method is not appropriate. The SEC has made clear that it's not appropriate to use the IRS's method. That's the SIFL rate. You cannot use a SIFL rate. The SEC believes that the aggregate incremental cost disclosed in the proxy should be much higher than what the SIFL rate is. Beyond that, practice does vary a bit. Some of the literature out there focuses on the flight leg analysis because that's what the SEC focused on back in, when the SEC changed its rules in 2006, an extra leg for a flight to drop off a kid at college, for example. But the reality is that most companies use an actual use method to calculate the split between personal and business use. So under the FAA's rules, flight hours are closely tracked, they're logged. So these companies use this documented data to calculate the number of hours, the number of minutes, and that are truly split between personal and business use. Bear in mind that with the actual use method, it captures variable things like gas, but there often are costs that would be incurred regardless of that are apportioned to the personal use category because of the SEC's incremental cost standard. The SEC has specifically noted that the incremental costs associated with deadhead flights, where a company plane flies without passengers either to pick up or after dropping off an executive, for personal reasons, that should be included in the incremental cost. In comparison, if an executive flies commercial, companies price out what the flight would have been without that personal leg to determine what the business expense would be. The difference between the two is the value of the perk that's disclosed. So the practical issue here is that the cost of flights sometimes varies dramatically from day to day, and the calculation of determining the perk value often is conducted well after the fact, at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year. So it's not as easy as you might think to be able to track that retroactively. For more of my vid guides about perks, there are dozens of them. You can go to zippypoint.com or search YouTube with the hashtags of #perks and #zippypoint.